Welcome, folks. Just wait a couple seconds as more people join here. I see some numbers coming up. My name is Tyler Colburn. I am the professional development consultant here at the Nova Scotia College of Social Workers. If you've been on a few webinars, lunch and learns, or panel discussions in the last month, you've probably seen my face. I'm replacing Naj, and I'm in the privileged position of being able to carry forward their work and their relationships. And so I'm very lucky to be here. Today, you're joining us for HR 101 with Adam Power. It's a social work introduction to human resources and business practices. Many social workers in this province, we have about 3,000 registered members. Many social workers are in positions of leadership or maybe have supervisory responsibilities or have staff that report to them. And so we see this session as offering some guidelines and support for how you might approach human resources in your context. And we're going to get started with the land acknowledgements. I'm going to go through that. Oh, and just a reminder, we are recording as well. This is a panel discussion, so your names and your presence on Zoom won't be seen. If you're an attendee, it'll only be myself and Adam. So firstly, I just want to say we are joining this call in Mi'kmaq, and I'm inviting you to also join in this land acknowledgement. You're welcome to check in the chat. We're going to leave the chat open throughout the session, but you go to placenames.mapdev.ca and let us know where you're calling in from, ideally with the Mi'kmaq or Indigenous name for the land that you're on. And also let us know how you're doing. How are you arriving? It's Friday the 13th, so maybe you're feeling a little spooky, or maybe you're feeling lucky to be here on lunch. Up to you. But yeah, check in on the chat. We'd love to hear how you're doing and the place name for where you're calling in from. So want to begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking from not Chibuktuk, actually. I'm in Punamukutijik. I'm very lucky to be working from home today, and that's colonially known as Dartmouth, Punamukutijik, and it's located on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. The inherent rights of the Mi'kmaq were recognized in the Peace and Friendship Treaty signed with the Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, and the Passamaquoddy peoples from 1725 to 1779. The series of treaties did not surrender Indigenous land, resources, or sovereignty to the British Empire, but instead established rules for an ongoing relationship between nations. Canadians later reaffirmed the treaties in Section 35 of the Constitution Act of 1982, and they remain active to this day. So let's take some time to pause in reflection and gratitude for the land where we live and work. On the right here, you see an image that's a tree stump and a human fingerprint, and it's really drawing to the idea that we are nature. We are expressions of nature. We are expressions of the land. So, finding similarities between a crosscut of the rings of a tree and also what's found in our fingerprints. And so when we acknowledge the land, we must also begin to acknowledge the wisdom of this planet and align ourselves with its truths. There's a quote here at the bottom from Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures, a really amazing resource that I look to often. And it says, understand that the earth is not an extension of our bodies, it's the other way around. And so when we think of the challenges and the paradoxes that can come with the ways of knowing and being under settler colonialism or capitalism or white supremacy, oftentimes humans can present themselves as being separate and distinct from nature. And so just encouraging as we acknowledge the land, thinking about how we are also part of nature. We are expressions of the land. Let us take a moment to pause in gratitude for all who have and continue to heroically care and advocate for this beautiful land. May we join them in this sacred work. So pointing to the fact that there are many water protectors and land defenders around Turtle Island who are working quite actively to protect this land. Let us ground ourselves in the wisdom of the land-based Mi'kmaq teachings and values that we must all begin to learn. Let us work to decolonize ourselves, our practice, and this community that we share by working for justice for all living beings as an expression of our gratitude for being here. Let us take a deep breath and recenter ourselves away from the violent ways colonization fills our world and fills us. Let us take a deep breath and work on letting go of the unconscious bias that is everywhere inside and out. So may our session today lead us to be in right relationship with this land and with one another. And so thinking of the fact that we are also all treaty people. So here we're guided by the peace and friendship treaties. And many times people will think that the treaties really only apply to Indigenous folks. But the reality is that settler Canadians like myself have an accountability to uphold and respect the treaties and the rights and the responsibilities of Indigenous folks. So we're all treaty people. So as we think about that, how does this impact what we do and how we do it? How will it guide our work together today and going forward? So this session today is on HR 101, and I would argue that human resources is a fairly colonial concept. And so while we're, striving to be treaty people and also, striving for decolonization, that's sometimes in a paradoxical relationship with practices like human resources. So just holding on to that. Here at the college, we're committed to translating acknowledgement into action. It's not enough to just say that we acknowledge the land. We actually have to have clear and measurable impact in terms of reconciliation and truth. So the College of Social Workers, we're committing to translating this acknowledgement into action by seeking to implement the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to actions. We commit to doing what we can to become better treaty partners. So part of that is committing to learning and to unlearning. So if you're here for professional development, if you're a social worker under the Nova Scotia College of Social Workers, just considering that, we do have a core mandate for 1 hour of truth and reconciliation. And I would encourage folks to do even more. I think it's really important to explore learning and opportunities around decolonization and Indigenous resurgence and revitalization. We commit to using our professional development to both learn new ways of thinking and understanding the work we do, and to unlearn assumptions and bias so that we can ensure safer social work practice and a more just world for all people. We are grateful for the new CASW Code of Ethics that require us to shift from the illusion of neutrality to becoming anti-racist and fighting against racism and all intersectional prejudice that is part of colonization. On the left here, there's a quote here from Elie Wiesel that says, "We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented." So understanding that oppression happens at multiple levels. So as social workers, we often consider the micro, the meso, and the meso, and knowing that oppression happens across many different elements. So the ideological, the institutional, the interpersonal, the intrapersonal. And so holding on to this understanding that we can't be neutral, we have to take a side and have committed action towards social justice and liberation. And so some framing for our time together. This is fairly new for our professional development. And this again is adapted from the Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures, but these are from their broccoli seed agreements. And so the first one is your engagement with this session may not have immediate and or practical applications for you, and that is okay. And so we offer this one because we hope to challenge consumer mindset. It's really easy, I think, for any of us to step into a mindset where we go, I signed up for this thing. It's going to 100% match my expectations. And that may happen for you, but it also might not. It also honors the fact that for many learners, it takes time to integrate and process the learning. So you might end this call being like, wow, lots of ahas, or it might take you some time to think about it and reflect on it. You don't have to agree with anything presented or shared, but we ask that you be open to seeing what happens. So as we discuss HR 101, there might be information presented that's different than what you experienced in the past or what you understand to be true. And so know that we are taking a position of two truths can be true at the same time. We ask that you take responsibility for yourself by observing and learning from your unconscious and conscious responses. Human resources is a very diverse and complex topic. There's legislation and policy that guides a lot of it. There are practices that are implicit, there are practices that are explicit. And so HR is not a neutral topic. So you might have feelings or experiences in this content that maybe doesn't sit well with you, or maybe it really excites you. So just inviting you to be curious about whatever feeling you're having. And then it's up to you to decide how much you want to share and participate. That's partially true because we're on a webinar, so you don't have the opportunity to use your voice or your camera presence, but we do invite you to engage in the chat, and that's up to you if you'd like to or not. And then finally, we can all engage in ways that support others. And so just thinking about the fact that while this isn't a healing space, this isn't a therapeutic space, we are in relationship here. And so we can create and cultivate a space here that is good and supportive. So we're going to kick it over to Adam here in a minute, but I do want to read his bio and present him a little bit here. Adam Power is an academic chair in the School of Health and Human Services at NSCC, demonstrating leadership at the college and delivering educational experiences, including academic advising, coaching, mentoring, hiring, budgeting, and campus support. That's a lot. Adam is a registered social worker and has over 22 years of occupational experience in the health and human services field. He's also a sessional instructor at Cape Breton University in the Shannon School of Business around organizational management, and also a practicing clinical therapist. Adam previously led and managed the delivery of human services programs, and social enterprises for 14 years in the disability supports and services sectors, also working with the public, private, and nonprofit sector stakeholders. Adam has extensive formal education in social work with an MSW and a B.Sc from University of Victoria, which is where I just graduated from, an MBA from Cape Breton University, and a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from Mount Allison University. With that, I will stop sharing, and I'm going to pass it over to you, Adam, to take control.
Well, thanks,
And I'm just
Tyler.
gonna, yeah, and I'm just gonna put your Menti in the chat again for those who just arrived.
Yeah, and that's great. I'm going to share my screen there. I have a few slides to kind of keep me on track, so I don't go over the intended time. I just want to make sure I have the slides here ready to go. Just working through the technology. Let's see. Here we go. There we go. Everybody should be able to see my screen here. I just have this as like a little bit of a bridge, just an HR meme, just to kind of start our day. You've all probably been part of employee wellness programs or other programs that HR or your organizations are putting on, or organize them yourselves. So just a little kind of funny intro to kind of get us going there today with the wellness program, or somebody that obviously doesn't like broccoli in a little office meme. So again, thank you very much, Tyler, for inviting me, and Naj connected with me. And when we had the conversation earlier, I will say earlier in the summer, in the springtime, it was kind of centered around the college and our social workers taking leadership, management roles, HR, and moving from that kind of frontline role with their colleagues into possibly supervising or managing them. So kind of HR 101, looking at leadership and organizational effectiveness, and also kind of looking at kind of some basics regards to business. In our time today, it's going to be a general kind of overview. I think that's important, just to ground those expectations, because some of these topics we could spend an hour or half a day on, by all means. So again, if there's any questions at the end or during, please post them in the chat. I'll try to answer them during our time. And if there's anything you want to take offline that I can support you with my knowledge and experience, I can leave my contact information as well. So yeah, so just looking at that picture there, that was just for me, a reminder to put that picture as as kind of a little bit of a bridge. But identifying, so our objective today is to kind of identify approaches to leadership and management, the role of HR for social workers and organizations. So very broad, but again, hopefully you get something out of this. It may even reinforce the practices and supports that you're already doing as part of your leadership management or HR roles in organizations, or aspiring to in your future careers. I have a kind of a pre-assessment that I want you to kind of consider and thinking. I had the Menti piece that was in the chat. If you notice that people are responding to that, I'll kind of flip into that. But if you're comfortable responding in the chat, that's fine too. Just something to kind of consider before we take this session on, or kind of talk about values. Right? We think about organizations, we think about HR and leadership, but even think of ourselves as employees. Like, what are some values that an organization should uphold, right? Um, so I want to kind of give a little space there for that, but recognizing we only have about 40 minutes or so to kind of work through this. That's kind of a question I want to kind of center around with today. Where are you at? And what are those values that an organization should uphold? And then the piece is, okay, identifying that, how can organizations promote and ensure these values are occurring within the organization? So again, what are those ways that organizations can actually ensure that they're promoting them throughout the organization, and how are they occurring? And then another piece is measurement, right? How are those values being actually measured, so the work or the intended values are being upheld? So maybe I will just take a second there to see if anybody did respond into the Mentimeter. We got some responses here, so I appreciate that. That's great. So some of the values is probably going to keep going if anybody else adds there. So the menti.com and just that piece there, but show trust within the organization, respect, clarity, absolutely. Organizations that value creativity, accountability, social justice, equity, inclusion, integrity, relationships. Excellent. This is a great list, right? And so again, I know you all already come in with experience, understanding your values and the values of organizations that you want to work towards. And so some of that will come in our conversation today. Thank you very much for that. So when we think about HR, right? Human resources. And I will say that I'm not a HR professional. I'm a hiring manager. I'm part of the leadership team at a campus level at the Sydney Waterfront campus here in Sydney, and also part of the program management with regards to health and human services within NSCC. And my work in business is a social work. I'll tell you, back 20 some years ago, I was working frontline and moved into more of a leadership role and taking on some bookkeeping and accounting processes as well as some HR and hiring and performance management. Um, and one of my first years, I remember kind of getting an understanding of income statements, right? And looking at the income statement, and I saw that we had a deficit might have been $3,000 or $4,000. Maybe not a huge amount, but again, for somebody in my youth and 20s, that's still a lot of money. And trying to make sense of that. And then one of the questions I came about was, well, what happens to that? How do we deal with that? And the response I had at the time, I think I even accepted it for a period there and realized that no, things had to change. It was like, well, don't worry about that. It'll go back to zero in our in our next budget, right? But we still have to kind of work through that deficit, and then how are you paying that back, or how is that impacting things? So thinking about the business of social work, I was very naive early on in my career with the financial aspect and those responsibilities. So when we think about the business of social work, right, or business, you can use organization there, right? We are all confined through our resources, financial, right? What money's coming into our organization, what money's going out, and how do we get that? Are we funded by government? Are we also doing fundraising? Do we have enterprises and businesses that are generating revenue for us? Our most important resource, of course, is our human capital, and that's when we're talking about HR. The people that work for the organization and our customers and consumers are also those stakeholders that are important. And then our technical and material resources that we use. So when we think about finances, kind of things are budgeting, very important. And then income statements, your cash flow, right? You want to make sure that you have money there to be able what's coming in, what's coming out, and then obviously your balance sheet, your assets and liabilities. We're not going to get a chance to go in that, but again, organizations typically would have those are kind of the three main ones that you'd be working with, and it's important to have realistic expectations and what happens with if your profits or money at the end of the year does that go in some kind of restricted asset again, so those resources, again, that piece of our practice is something that we have to understand that we're working through and working with, and a big piece of that is also neoliberalism, right, where a lot of our services are now kind of promoted to be more market oriented, right? So we might have a privatization, so contract work instead of full-time work, we're having more contract workers, and the eroding of the welfare state, right? So government funding and things like that maybe decreasing or stalling. And so we're seeing that with inflation and things like that is putting a lot of pressure on our social services and social work practices and government or non-government organizations that we work in. So again, that piece there of reducing the government's involvement in the social work sector or in our sector is something to also be kind of mindful of within that practice. So how HR can impact our work. I just have two things here, but remember a lot of HR, right? When you think about HR, you think about policy, right? Hiring people, performance management, firing people. Sometimes that's what people kind of refer to just as HR, and I'll get into a little bit more details from that stuff. But our policy typically and should inform our practice, right? When policies are strong and meaningful and the language there is clear and concise, it can inform what we do in situations, right? It also allows, as employees, the opportunity for us to know what's expected of us in our workplace. And if there are issues or concerns, the process is there. It's also important to know that practice also informs our policy. So our policy shouldn't be something that's static. It's something that should be moving. And if our practices are evolving, our policies also need to evolve and recognizing the need for policy change and updates to make them current, right? And obviously make sure that they're also guided with legislation and pieces like that within law, labor relations, etc. And the other piece I have there with HR or just even public policy, but we'll just go with policy and work related policies. When policies are developed, typically they're centered around trying to resolve or work through or to lessen problems in the workplace. So Carol Backheis is kind of an author, an academic that I reviewed and read years ago, but they kind of what's the problem represented to be, and they kind of talked about public policy in that sense. But when you're thinking about your workplace policies, um, or as an employee or leader or manager, what is the problem that you're trying to reduce, eliminate, or work through? And oftentimes when policies are created, it's for a reason, and something may have happened in the past or currently that they're trying to address through kind of overarching policies there. I'm very fortunate in this role as a hiring manager and part of the leadership team that I have a lot of HR supports here at the campus level and at the provincial level within NSCC in the central office. And so I work hand in hand with our employee services advisor here at the local campus, and we have HR generalists and HR leads that I connect with on an ongoing basis. And sometimes it's proactive, just we have regular meetings just to discuss things that are coming up or any new policy development, things like that. So, but within your HR team, you're going to be working with, and if you're looking at being part of the HR team or you are the HR person for your organization, recruitment, right? So obviously looking and working with new individuals that you're excited to have as part of your team. It's important to know who are you recruiting, who's missing from that recruitment piece, and kind of how are you doing your recruiting? Are you getting the right people, right? With the right interests, the right values. And so that recruitment piece there is very important, and particular emphasis on equity, diversity, inclusion practices as well. Selection and retention, training and development, right? HR is a big part of that as well. Performance management, labor relations, right? You have collective agreements, and that comes up in the next piece. With the body of employees that you're working with. So, kind of when to reach out to a HR professional for help. So I think on all these pieces here, it's important to reach out. It's not always when troubles, right? You want to be proactive and have regular meetings. But questions related to policy, right? Sometimes policy can be very wordy, and what does that actually mean in practice, right? Strong policies with regards to HR may also have procedures or a plain language document that'd be helpful. Collective agreements, trying to understand collective agreements and what does that mean as a manager working with HR team to understand kind of what are those opportunities there and what are the limitations within that collective agreement. And any novel experiences, especially as a new manager, as you're developing your skills. There are going to be a lot of novel experiences. And so connecting with HR or somebody else, even that shared leadership piece will be very important to get an understanding of what practices have worked in the past, what approaches. So again, kind of those are the core pieces where we're reaching out with an HR professional for help would be important. And for you, anybody interested in developing their HR skills, these are the areas that you'd probably want to concentrate on. The next slide kind of again is looking at HR piece, but also expanding into leadership and management of organizations. Because for a lot of individuals, including myself, for about 15 years of my career, I was doing HR and finances, the business aspect of our social enterprises, in that leadership and management role. We had a small, flat organization, so we didn't have dedicated departments or individuals for all those tasks. And I can speak from experience, my own opportunities and struggles from moving from frontline to management supervisory role. I've done it really twice in my career. Back in the early 2000s, I took on a role of a frontline worker, moving from kind of employment supports into an assistant director role with a lot more seasoned colleagues. And so building those relationships was really important for them, and recognizing kind of my boundaries, right? My boundaries of what in my own style, in my relationships with the people that I worked with, that I managed or led. And even in my current role, with the college is relatively new. This is my second year as academic chair. Prior to that, the 5 years prior to that, I was a faculty member, and so now I'm part of that supervisory leadership team of the faculty in health and human services here in Sydney Waterfront. And so I've had existing relationships with the faculty because they are my colleagues. So moving into this role, I already had those pre-existing relationships as faculty. So knowing that, having those boundaries is really important, right? In conversations, in relationships, right? We still go out for lunch. We still, have conversations that we did as same as when I was faculty. However, there's time that I think faculty or staff need time to be away from me. They need time to vent. They need time to maybe even be critical of the work that I do. All I ask is usually with the faculty or staff is that they also kind of bring any concerns to my attention so I can deal with them. So again, it's really important with that of your boundaries and relationships. There are going to be changes, right? But there's opportunities in with that. And depending on your relationships prior to your role as a manager or supervisor, there may be a greater curve or a greater need for those boundaries and relationships as well. And one of the things about the kind of the great debate, what I put that in there is oftentimes management may be looked at as something that's a negative, and leadership is kind of striking and important, and we all should be leaders. And that's far from the truth, right? If everybody has leadership skills, the tasks may not get done, right? So it's very important that we kind of balance that. The two that I kind of highlight here, and there are many, many different styles of leadership, is kind of that transactional, task-oriented leadership. They're really about authority, right, and their role, identifying mistakes and disciplining staff again. And then that transformational piece is more people-oriented, right, where they mentor their staff. They challenge their staff to improve and do better and meet their personal and professional goals. They're able to take perspective, right? Take other people's perspectives in, building that emotional intelligence and awareness, and are moving towards organizational goals. And it's not to say that transformational is always great and always going to work within organizations. In fact, having that balance of transactional and transformational is really important. And as you develop your leadership skills and those that are currently leaders, it's what's authentic to yourself, right? How are you authentic in that role? And that's really important for the individuals that are working with you, that they understand your positions and know where you're at. Know that's up to change as well. Another big piece, think about HR, but think about leadership and management, is the conversations we have with our team. And so I kind of have two pieces there, and they're very interconnected. Authentic conversations, right? So we have some individuals that communicate, right? And you may have experienced that your times where you communicated with individuals and come off appeared as aggressive. You have other people that are maybe more passive in their communication, right? They just try to avoid conflict. So that authentic conversation kind of balances between it's more of assertive piece where you're speaking with facts and feelings. And it's important, it's important to have those conversations because the outcomes have a direct impact on relationships in their work. If people don't have the information they need to make change or to improve their processes or improve the work outcomes, then we have a responsibility to have those conversations as leaders, managers, HR professionals. When you think about the authentic conversations, right? It's about caring enough that change has to occur for the relationship to either be maintained. So you think about sometimes having to compromise, but a way that kind of hopefully works to figure out what are the facts and balancing them with individuals' emotional needs as well, including your own. Crucial conversations, just taking a kind of a little bit another step forward. It's discussions among two or more individuals that hold opposing opinions about high stake issues and emotions are strong. This can happen in our case management, our files, our workday. It happens in our family lives as well. The big thing about conversations is kind of be open, obviously being honest and respectful. Don't exaggerate, stick with what's happening right now, what has to be dealt with. And also while being respectful, being focused, right? On what the opinions are in the issue, but also being flexible enough to ensure that other people are being heard and others' emotions are also being accounted for. Whenever you're having a conversation with somebody, think about where you're at, right? Start with self. And in addition to that is kind of what is it that you want? What is it that you want from the conversation? Is it to be right? Maybe, but then you got to question, what does that look like? Right. And a piece like that. And it kind of, this piece here really kind of gathers in when I think about HR management leadership. You think about your work as social workers and the work that we do on a daily basis, right? About having those authentic conversations. We're having them with the people that we support, our clients, consumers, service users. How are we doing that within the workplace? Are we providing that same respect that we do for our service users, to our colleagues, coworkers, and employees that may be working with us as we have leadership management roles? Big piece for leadership, again, taking on that HR and business practices. We know that a lot of leaders, and there's a lot of different tests and personality tests and things like that, but we recognize a lot of leaders that are effective have a high emotional intelligence. And I feel like speaking to social workers, if I was speaking to business students, and when I'm speaking to organization students in my organizational behavior and management courses, this concept may not be, they might not be aware as much as this group would be, but it starts with self, that self-awareness, right? So when our conversations and when we're dealing with HR issues and practices, it starts with self, right? I have an understanding of my own emotions, where I'm at in this place, my triggers, things, and where I'm at right now. And that's great to have that awareness. But that next step is to also be able to manage myself, right? I may be upset. I may be frustrated. I may be angry. Um, but here's what I choose to do to manage that so that I can have a conversation with somebody that, again, is honest and respectful. On top of that self-management strategies and having that self-awareness, it's also that emotional piece, is that social awareness, right? Aware of other people's emotions and where they're at, right? Are they heightened right now? Is this the best time to have a conversation? Do we need more time before we have a conversation? Is the environment the right place to have the conversation? Have that social awareness, right, of others and how others are responding, and so that perception, and also that relationship management piece is a key there, that you're able to help support other individuals in their emotions. When supporting team members, right? In a leadership management HR position, I'm kind of using them a little bit interchangeably now. We're going kind of some behavior basics, and I'm kind of going back to some of the, behavior strategies and things like that I learned a long time ago, in maybe my psychology courses and things like that. But again, think about your practices in social work, and we talk about what's one of the best ways to support that social learning, right? Is if we want people to exhibit certain behaviors in the workplace, we need to be able to role model those desired behaviors ourselves, right? Set up that environment for success. But role modeling is the biggest way. If you're dealing with employee issues related to improper use of equipment, attending work late or leaving early, not getting their work completed in a certain time, right? I'm just giving some general examples here, and we can, if there's specific examples, I don't see the chat right now, and maybe Tyler's monitoring that. What are we doing ourselves, right? Are we using our company equipment for our own personal interest, and employees are aware of that? Are we arriving late and early? Maybe we are. Maybe the employees just don't understand the reason why, because you had other meetings and things like that. So again, role model those desired behaviors, and then we're thinking about kind of, when I think about positive behavior supports, kind of going with the proactive, and then behavior strategy and consequence strategy. So setting up the environment for success. So when I started this conversation today, we kind of looked at human resources, financial resources, material and technical resources. Do the employees have what they need to do the work they're expected to do? Right? So how are we setting up the environment for success? So those proactive strategies, if we know there are issues that are affecting employees, are there ways that we can eliminate or reduce those barriers for them to be successful? We should do that. Skills training, right? If individuals are not performing where the expectations are, is it because do they actually have the skills, right? They may have the right motivation, right, and attitude, but if they don't have the skills, is there training that's needed? Sure that just because somebody was trained, maybe they need to be retrained. Maybe they need to be trained differently, right? We all learn differently, so maybe the way we're doing our training is not effective for everybody's learning style. And the other piece then is we want to reinforce desired behaviors. So I'm saying consequence strategies there. I'm not speaking about punishment here. I'm speaking about reinforcing the desired behaviors. How are we demonstrating to people and reinforcing so that they know and are aware that we're content with their work, we're excited for their work. And so we want to see again that reinforcement strategy is we're much more likely to see an increase in desired behaviors with reinforcement strategies than punishing undesired behaviors. And so kind of pieces of this with the social work and our practices, again, actively listening, right? Asking questions, just listening, right? Big thing for leadership, listen more than you talk, right? Again, I feel like I'm in an intro social work course right now. Focus on strengths, that's strengths perspective. Focus on strengths of your team, your individual team members. Again, looking at that, looking at the individual, looking at the groups and teams and looking at the organization as a whole. Where are the strengths? Let's focus on that. Let's start with that, right? Of course, maybe there's some deficits in areas that need to be improved, but let's identify what the strengths are. So being solution focused. At times we can kind of get caught up in the problem and situate it there in the problem, and it just keeps problem posing. The problem, it just gets bigger without, and so let's kind of reframe it to look at what's at the solutions. Meet needs, starting with ourselves when we're working with individuals, especially when you're thinking about conflict. What are your needs when you're going into that conversation, into that opportunity to resolve the conflict? If your needs aren't met, right? If go back to Maslow's or ERG theory, then we got to maybe meet them, make sure that we're well rested, that we have some food and nourishment in our bodies, that we're feeling safe. And again, our employees that we work with, we need to make sure that we're trying to meet their needs too, especially if we explicitly know what they are. And if we don't, and if you don't, ask the question, what can I do for you? What do you need right now from me? Oftentimes in supporting team members, I'll ask them, and so this is going to be interesting. If any of the staff I currently support kind of listen to this and be like, that's what Adam's using some of his tips and tricks on me. But I'll ask them, like, sometimes it's just a vent. They don't want me to do anything other than just they need somewhere to vent and listen to. I'll ask them what they'd like me to do, right? They may already have the solution, right? They already know how to cope or how to work through it. So it's maybe just for me encouraging that piece. So again, conversation's important, and asking, what can I do? What do you need? Doesn't mean we can always get what they want. And that's that kind of ethical piece of care ethics and piece, which I don't have here on a slide, but it's really kind of important. It's what's right or wrong, but moving towards that, what's the responsible thing that I can do to support that employee? Moving the care ethics there, yes, it has to acknowledge our policies and practices and also acknowledge our rules and the cost benefit piece. But at the end of the day, it's what can I do to support that person so that they have their needs met, and if we can't meet those needs, we explain to them why we can't. Review processes and policy, right? It's not always an employment issue. It may be our processes and policy are not clear or not developed well. Allow time for debriefing. Incidents, right, occur in the workplace all the time with employees, between employees. And so having an opportunity not to assess blame, right, but to work through the issue and then come back and debrief, find out. It's also an opportunity for you to learn about your own skills in managing and leading individuals, and HR pieces can do what worked well. What can I do next time to improve the outcome? And what can I do in the environment maybe to be more proactive so something like this doesn't happen again, right? Be prepared to be surprised in a debrief. Information that you think You may be surprised and find out that the reason behind the behavior, the conflict, was not what you first thought it was about. It could be other things that's impacting somebody personally that they're bringing into the workplace. And so how are you supporting that individual? Humility, right? Huge, huge. The best leaders I've ever experienced and been around have had humility, right? It's important. Yes, we want to build our competencies. However, we got to recognize that there's a lot that we don't know. So be curious, be humble. When you're communicating, interacting with individuals, when you're implementing HR practices, it's about how are you going to be responsive as things need to change. Transparency. Do employees have the information that they need to do the work? If we're in management or leadership roles, or HR is withholding information, how can we expect people to do that? That's pertinent to people's work. How can we expect people to be, have that optimal level of work when they don't have all the information they need to do their jobs well? And apologizing, being sincere when you are wrong. Right? I don't always get it right, and it's important that I apologize if I'm wrong and when I'm wrong. Also acknowledge it, but apology is just one piece of it, and then actively working to ensure that that I'm able to make those corrections, so the next time I have a better process and with working and supporting employees, and so that will hopefully lead to better outcomes, and it also helps build that relationship. Common pitfalls, right? So some of the things you're gonna see kind of that HR realm with employees is they have difficulty with work-life integration. Oftentimes we talk about it as kind of work-life balance. This is another term that kind of comes up, this work-life integration, where they're not totally separate, right? So we think about remote work, people feeling like they're responsible for communicating with their managers evenings and weekends, or that, and that's not typically their work day. So balancing or integrating your work with your private life and your roles and those multiple selves is really can be very difficult for people. And you may see that spill over into some individuals' work because there's other things happening to them professionally or personally outside of work. Role ambiguity, right? Is there a job description that's clear and has details of what the work is expected, right? Some people get hired, start work, or have been in roles for years, and they're still not really sure what they're expected to be doing. So with that role ambiguity can be, again, very challenging for the employee, and ultimately the organization is going to be impacted by that. People may leave because they're not actually sure of the work they're supposed to be doing, or that psychological contracts there and they're not actually doing the work that they were hired for and what they were expecting. So checking that out is very important. Lack of job autonomy, right? So kind of the flip side of that is being micromanaged, right? Again, I think it's important to support, strong orientation, do check-ins with your staff. But if you're somebody that needs to approve every purchase, maybe there's something in there, maybe there's a policy for that, but every email, every communication, there's issues there in kind of your management style. Or there's issues with that employee's performance. That could be it too. So, but again, individuals want to have some self-direction, and job autonomy is really important. Situational factors, just going back, and people can have their motivation and the ability to do the work, and they have that, they're kind of have that perspective, they know what they're expected to do, but there may be situational factors, right? Like there's not enough, they don't have the correct tools or materials, or workspace is not set up well for them. Maybe there's too many people in the team, maybe there's not enough people in the team to kind of get all the work that's required done. So there's situational things, could be financial difficulties in the organization that are impacting people's work performance. Lack of skills training, they don't have the skills, they don't have the opportunity to upgrade their skills. Again, as management and HR, you're not understanding the employee's actual needs, motivation, right? So what are some of those things? And I guess another piece of the common pitfall is organizations, maybe some of those external pieces, how decisions are made in the organization can also impact people's motivation, with kind of procedural justice and organizational justice. Another common pitfall is assuming the employee is the issue, right? It's easier to say, that employee's not working out well or something, why they're not a good fit in the organization. But I think we also want to take that, again, perspective of, as an organization, is there issues that we're responsible for that are creating the employee for not working as well as we think they should be, or they're capable of, or that they're expressing interest in. And the other pitfall is obviously sometimes not exiting employees respectfully, right? Or not exiting employees at all, right? Turnover can be important for an organization. It's good for the health of an organization to bring in new individuals. If too much turnover is not necessarily a good thing, that's probably more of a sign of processes and issues within the organization. And but when employees are not motivated, are not satisfied with their work, um, uh, and they're not doing the work that's expected of them, and they have interest in working other places. Maybe we can support them by helping them find other employment, right? Um, and then terminating employment, of course, is an option at times too. You got to look at the health of the organization as well as the health of the individual, and even when terminating, you should look at what supports can we offer to ensure that person is safe and feeling cared for. Kind of getting to the end of my presentation. I'll ask some questions, or I'll have some time for some questions, but just here's some examples. And I have the reference list on the end here, kind of the top. There's a number of top 100 employers in the country, and they provide a lot of reasons why they're on the top 100 with regards to equity, diversity, inclusion. So these are just some. I kind of looked at different ones. Again, a lot of them are larger organizations, but I think the work that they're doing, and I think there's a lot of local things and provincial work that's working out well too on this. But if you're thinking about your organization and how to promote more diversity, equity, and inclusion, for instance, these are some things that larger organizations are doing, but you can take them and bring them down and scale it to your organization as well. So they're right there. You can probably just read through them. Inclusive hiring. They have a mental health policy here, Children's Aid Society of Toronto, equity-based hiring. A lot of these organizations have employee resource groups. And even something we do here at NSCC, written questions are prior to the interviews. Individuals get that piece. So again, just kind of important to look at some of these pieces here and take that back to your employer, or take that back to your organizations that you're leading. And what are you doing to kind of, again, support and promote that in throughout the organization? And kind of before I kind of finish off, just thinking about leaving this, what values do you hold that will make you an ideal candidate? Your current or future role as leader, managers in an organization. Just speaking to what I kind of talked about today, how can you promote and ensure these values are occurring within the organization for yourself and team members? Right? How will you measure those values? How do you ensure they're actually ongoing and working towards those values? And what do you need to do? What does your organization need to do better to support you and others as valuable employees? That's just a little bit of a reference list there.
Thanks, Adam. And I just when Adam and I had met to discuss this opportunity today, we also wanted to, maybe share some practical resources for you. So the references that'll be available in the recording of this will be really useful. But I just want to pop one in the chat as well from HR intervals. And so I've been on both sides of the HR. Not that it's a binary, but I've been, someone who held responsibility and someone who also experienced support and harm through HR. And so HR Intervals offers things like job descriptions, et cetera. So a base starting point for folks who are engaged in HR. And I just want to say, I really resonated with your point around humility. I think of some of the best supervisors and bosses I've had a lot of humility and showed up very authentically, had good boundaries, and were able to, delicately balance that friendly approach with also understanding the power that they held. And it's something that I strive for when I'm also supervising and leading. So thank you for that. Also, there's some time for some questions, and you said you'd be open to some questions. And so if folks have any questions, there's really three ways to do it. You can pop a question in the chat. You can also use the Q&A function, and you can raise your hand. And again, as Adam said, we're not an HR professional per se, but has a lot of experience and context in HR, especially as it relates to power and social work practice. So if you have any HR questions, we can do our best to answer them. But we might not be able to get really specific or granular. Yeah, but please, a few seconds there to moments for folks to put in questions if you have any in the chat, or even reflections and comments.
Yeah, I think like the leadership, like when I think about, my social work practice and studies, it really sets social workers up for those leadership management HR
Hmm.
roles because of the context, being able to take in those perspectives, being able to kind of take those that care ethics into
Hmm.
consideration and kind of recognizing the context of power and how that operates within organizations and
Hmm.
how to work that so that, the organizations that I've worked for that have done really well when you think about as social workers, what we want is to treat the clients, the consumers, the service users really well. And so, I'm a manager. My hope is that when I'm working with my staff that I'm working with, that they feel I'm treating them as well as our in NSCC, that the employees I work under are treated as respectfully as our consumers, the students
Hmm.
population, right? Or as your
Yeah,
customers. If you're thinking about business practices, do your staff, are they treated as well as your customer? Right? Because we
yeah,
always talk about customer acquisition and retention, and making sure they have a great experience. We need to take that and make sure we're doing that in our organizations as well
yeah. I
for
mean, you
for
said
our
at
staff.
the very beginning, right? Like the biggest resource of a business organization is the human resources, it's the
Yeah,
people, right? And people are complex, and so there's no
very
one
much
way.
so.
But yeah, right.
Yeah.
I know I'm very complex. If anyone on this call has ever been my supervisor, they're probably going, "Okay, Tyler." A lot of needs. Um, yeah, haven't seen any questions pop in yet. Wondering if Adam, if there are any questions you want to answer, like as if you were on this call as someone who's viewing this, what might be a question you would hold?
Yeah, just sometimes I think and just kind of going to go back off my personal experience early in my career, I would think I have to have that answer right away. Like time
Mm,
is your friend, right? Time is your friend. So if you don't have an answer right now, take the information, but then say, can I get back to you, right? 'Cause sometimes that
mhm.
can help you clarify your perspective, review policy and practices, or be able to bounce it off maybe one of your senior managers, somebody else. But sometimes that time can just help kind of be um, clarify, your response because you don't want to
Mhm.
give the wrong response when you don't have all the information or have time to kind of process it. The other thing I
Mhm.
also do, and I encourage my staff to do this too when they're communicating with somebody, if I have a conversation, a crucial conversation, I'll follow up with an email, right?
Mhm.
Because I want to make sure that I've kind of covered it and been able to paraphrase kind of those main points, what was discussed, and my responsibilities of what I was going to follow up on, and any responsibilities that was kind of identified that maybe the employee would have to follow up on. And I do that with I ask employees to do that with students as well when they're having communication because I think it's just a
Mhm.
way to keep that there, and it's not to so I got you or to go back and be able to penalize or discipline somebody if they didn't do it. It's just for that record so that because sometimes emotions, information, right,
Yeah.
processing, it's just having that follow up, just an email with just kind of the Coles notes of what was discussed, a couple of points is just important because then and I enjoy that too when I have conversations with people and they send me an
Mhm.
email.
Same. I do see a question in here from one of our attendees. It says, "Do you think social workers as team leaders support managers or employees? Do you view role confusion potential?"
Absolutely, there can be role confusion because we think about that leadership management piece, and I can't remember. I kind of talked about influence, right? And so, if you want to identify yourself as being a leader in the organization, think about your scope of influence, right?
Mhm.
And for managers, they may have a title, and that provides that power and influence. But if you remove that management title, do the employees actually follow their direction, follow their lead? If no, then
Right.
that manager they can still be great on that task orientated behavior, but maybe that's that people orientated they need to kind of do some work on. So I think you're kind of in between, right? You want to support your manager when you're doing well, right? And if there's
Mhm.
areas that they can improve on, that become very challenging because you know your manager's personality. Are they receptive to new ideas? Are they open, right? To change.
Yeah.
And so you're taking that from your experience with them. How receptive are they going to be to having a conversation where you're going to identify and focus on what they do well, but maybe areas
Mhm.
they need to do. And then with the supporting employees, right? It's that group piece, and I think that's important because you're kind of in it together and working the front line. Your manager may have an understanding of that. Um, but again, that role ambiguity, they may still not be everything that you do may not be quantified or qualified in your job description. So
Mhm.
I think there can be some role confusion, absolutely. Um, but I think that's that context that we work in as social workers. You're kind of
Mhm.
supporting both at times, and but also when something's not going well, it needs to be informed. The big struggle is when you do take it to the person that you're expecting to facilitate change and they don't change
Mm.
or they can't change it. And that's a difference, right? Maybe they cannot change that policy or practice um, for whatever reason, but hopefully they communicate that, right? Rather than
Mhm.
at some point. So that, again, you feel heard, you feel valued. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think social workers as team leaders can be both. I think,
Mhm.
it's not either or. And I again, as social work, it's all contextual, right? We're going in there, we're going through maybe some postmodern theory, right? And
Yeah.
recognizing that it depends. Again, important piece there.
Yeah, it depends. That should be the tagline.
Yeah, yeah, it
Social
depends.
works. Well, folks, I'm going to share my screen. And again, Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this is a helpful opportunity for folks who want to deepen their understanding of HR. I think this is useful for most people. At some point in your life, you will probably have some sort of HR responsibility if you don't already. And even just to understand even if you don't have a supervisory responsibility, this can give insight to what it might be like for your supervisor, someone who might have power over you within an agency and
Absolutely.
institution. Because, supervisors are imperfect. And sometimes I've had to, offer some support and guidance as the employee and saying, like, this is actually what I'm looking for in supervision. Could you maybe meet that standard that is important to me? So it can be helpful for anyone on this call. I did want to share my screen one more time and just point to some of our upcoming events. Pardon me here. Every time I share my screen, it always does something different for me. Um, there we go. Yeah, so upcoming events. So we have lots of professional development opportunities. And reminder, we are surprisingly coming up to registration and renewal. So between December and January, I know many of us will be putting in our professional development hours. So there's lots coming up in the next month or two that you can still partake in if you're looking for some hours. September 17th, so next Tuesday, we have a discussion forum that's going to be supporting our self-care. So small group discussions around self-care from like peer support. October 2nd, we have a redesigning our guiding documents, and this is specific to clinical specialization standards. This is going to be hosted by Alec with 3 other social workers and leaders. We're going to be speaking to the changes in clinical specialization. October 9th, we have a panel discussion on decolonizing our care. So we'll have 4 to 5 folks who will be joining us to talk about how we can decolonize. This is part of our interprofessional series. So we'll hopefully have some folks from, psychotherapy, occupational therapy, maybe rec therapy, spiritual care, etc. Still looking for some speakers on that. And then October 24th, we'll have our communities of practice. So if you're looking to engage in discussion and learn with and share resources and ideas with other social workers, this is a great opportunity. It's meant to be fairly informal and peer-based. So that's what we have coming up. Also encourage you to check out our communication channels. And so if you haven't subscribed to us on Eventbrite, that's a really great way to stay atop of what sessions we're having upcoming. Our newsletter, which you can find at our website, is really great. We also have YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Also great places to see what's happening at the college and stay informed. Stop sharing there. Pardon me while I figure this out. And that's it, folks. I hope you have a good long, well, that's not a long weekend, it's a short weekend, pardon me. I hope you have a good rest of your Friday the 13th. Watch out for black cats if you have that superstition like I do. But yeah, hopefully you have things to look forward to this week and enjoy the transition from fall or summer into fall. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you.